We all know hard work and perseverance pays off, but would you be willing to drive from the Bay Area to the Ribbon Ridge AVA in Oregon every other weekend to pursue your dream? Well, Dan from Utopia Wines did just that for multiple years to make his dream of becoming a winemaker a reality. Please enjoy my conversation and thank you for watching. Dan, thank you so much for being here today. Not being here today. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, AJ. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it was interesting. I woke up this morning and there was like a little bit of snow on the ground, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not sure what it's going to be like up here on Ribbon Ridge this morning.
Yeah, we were getting a light dusting earlier, and I thought it might turn into something more, but so far it really hasn't. We've got hit with some really cool temperatures this week after we had that beautiful weather.
Oh man!
For like 2 weeks almost, we had a February thaw.
Yeah, it was
there,
nice,
and it was great. But I'm actually really glad that we're getting some hard freeze this week because it's really good for the vines.
Yeah, make them stress out a little bit.
Yeah, keep them dormant.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. All right, shall I pour us a little bit of wine?
That'd be great.
Okay, great. I remember last year when I came up here, you were just coming out of the vineyard. You were walking up, and you were doing some work out there. And so, how are things looking this year? And pruning, I assume, is all done and everything.
We're done. We finished last week. We got everything tied down, and we've even flailed our brush. And now we're kind of just waiting for a little bit of moisture because it's been a little bit dry the last couple of weeks. So the next little rain that we get, we'll get out our mechanical weeder and get to work on the weeds under the vine. The timing has to be just right in terms of the soil moisture for it to work really well.
Right.
And so we'll get that started. But I mean, essentially, we're ready to go. We're kind of waiting on bud break right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, cheers.
Feels good.
Yeah. Spring. I always love spring. Yes. So again, feel free to comment on it if you want to. There's zero pressure. It's all completely up to you.
This wine, it's not a young wine. I mean, I think it has a few years on it at least.
Right.
Maybe 5 years, I would guess.
Okay.
Maybe 5 or 6 years in the bottle. It's got a slight amount of Brett, but it's not overpowering on the nose. Mm-hmm. It seems to be fairly integrated with the wine, and it's can be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always fun to bring a little blind bottle to just explore and, just I find it to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's got a nice, silkiness to the texture. I like the mouthfeel a lot.
Right.
It carries through the mid palate, and it's very silky. I like that. I'm really big on texture.
Yeah, to me, what gets me about this is there's that kind of funky florist floor, sensation to it, and I'm like, ooh, what kind of.
Yeah, spicy.
Yeah.
It's definitely spicy, and some of that's Brett, and some of it's probably the variety as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, diving back into like your past and your history, you really weren't that much into wine to kind of start with, and you kind of got into some Burgundian wines, and you converted your laundry room into a wine cellar, and then you started collecting, and then you opened up a wine shop in Napa. And while you were, had that wine shop in Napa, it sounded like that you were doing some tastings with a Ronn Wiegand, world's first master sommelier in '86.
Yeah.
What was that like, and what did you learn from him?
Well, I learned quite a bit, and by the way, I'm impressed. You know a little bit about the history, so you obviously did your homework there.
I try.
Yeah, so I actually started as a collector in my 20s, and after a few years, I had a pretty big cellar, and I decided to get licensed and start a wine business in Napa. It was essentially an import-export business there, and through that, business, the affiliations with the up-and-coming winemakers and some of the other folks in Napa like Ronn and Peter Marks, to be a name dropper. I was able to hone my palate. So I learned a lot about, how to evaluate wines and, what the experts considered, the differences between a good wine and a great wine, and how to really focus on that and understand the template that they're using in their mind when they're evaluating wines. And there was a point where I was tasting 200 to 300 wines a week there for 10 years. So you get pretty good at it, And
Right.
I have a number of stacks of comp books of tasting notes that I collected over the year that I wrote. So when you're writing it down, you develop a vocabulary for it, and you really get a deeper understanding of it, and then you develop that template in your mind. So when you're tasting a wine, you almost get like a 3D image of the wine in your mind, and it really helps you to understand the wine and even the winemaking process and the characteristics of the varieties, and
Right.
helps you eliminate what it isn't, and like a blind tasting like today, and
Right.
coming around to what it actually is.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So tasting about 70 wines a day, right? If you're looking at 200 or 300 a week,
Yeah.
how when I was a wine judge for the McMinnville wine competition in
Yeah.
2020,
Right.
and my palate, it was
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
After 100, and I'm like, can't imagine doing that every day.
When people hear that, they think, "Wow, you're so lucky,"
No.
and they don't understand that it's really work,
It is.
and that you're spitting all of that wine. Otherwise you'd be unconscious after 10 or 15 of them,
Of course.
even a small taste. So, the way that I learned to do it was to rest, in between, drink water, eat a little bread, make sure that you're spitting,
Right.
but to take even a minute's rest in between the wines, let your palate recover. But yeah, the tannins build up on your palate. It becomes more and more difficult. But with practice, if I'm tasting, let's say I tasted, 100 wines
Right.
that day, right? Then 10 of them are going to stand out to me typically. And those are the
Right.
ones that I'm going to want to get a hold, purchase,
Of course.
and use in my business,
Right.
So you're some of them you can eliminate pretty quickly, if they're just not what you want, then you can move on fairly quickly.
Yeah, no, and that's a totally different perspective than trying to judge the wine and be like, oh, is it? Right, because you're like, not good, not good. Oh, that one's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I remember even like the next day after judging, I was like, no, I don't. Like tasting anything was just awful. Just normal food. And I'm like, no, I want this to go away, and it just wasn't. It wasn't going away.
Yeah, no, it's real work. Even in the winery, when tasting the barrels and stuff,
Right.
trying to figure out the lots, which I usually start around June. Wines are completely finished; they've had time in the barrel. They're pretty close to what they're going to be. They're at a stage where I can tell, what they're going to be in the bottle pretty much, and I'll start tasting the barrels to determine the final blends. I'll taste each barrel a half a dozen times, over the period of the summer, to get ready for a fall bottling. Right. And that's taste 30, 40 barrels each time, and 2 or 3 days in a row to get
Right.
making my notes and everything. So that can be people really think that's fun, but it's not really.
No, it's real work.
It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's hard to.
It's not fun, but it is work. It is serious work, and
Right.
I would much rather just take a nice bottle and go to lunch than to sit there and taste 30 or 40 or more barrels
Right.
to try to determine my final blends. That is very stressful.
It is.
Yeah.
And when you take the bottle to lunch, it's like, no
Yeah,
pressure, no stress. Thank
That's
you.
what wine's all about.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
In looking back again over your history, there looked like there was that you had a label called La Course.
La Coast was
La
my
Coast.
partner's label.
Oh, okay.
In Napa.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I thought it was yours, so I couldn't find hardly anything about it. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I need more information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my partner, Bruce Scotland,
Okay.
in my import-export wine business there, and was going to be one of the original founders of Utopia, but he went off and did a brand called Highlands, and he's still there in Napa now. It's Howell Mountain Fruit.
Right.
His good friend Mike Beatty, who owns Beatty Ranch Vineyard on Howell Mountain, or did at least, as far as I know, still does.
Right.
And so he's making some really nice Cab and Zinfandel wines from there.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That always had been kind of nugging at me or tugging at me. I
Yeah.
was just like, I can't find any information. It was difficult. So thank you.
You're welcome.
You were in Napa, and then you ended up here in Oregon. Why did you come up to Oregon?
Because I wanted to own the land and make world-class Pinot Noir and Chardonnay.
Okay.
So being in Napa, prime vineyard land in Napa, unless you're a corporate entity or if you were born in the lucky gene pool or somehow got very wealthy, that's, it's not going to happen. So,
Okay.
It was mainly because I knew, number one, that I couldn't afford the land in Napa. Number two, this was going to become the next Napa. And it was really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, maybe once in many lifetimes opportunity to get in on the ground floor of the next thing in the wine world in North America.
Right.
And it was like, well, whatever I have to do to make that a reality, let's do it. And I spent 2 years searching for the ideal spot, which led me to this place when I came to look at the farm below, which was for sale,
Right.
which was not a vineyard at the time, back in 2000. And when I got there, I was like, well, this is okay, but that's the spot right there up the hill. And it was a horse property, and I haven't cut down a single tree here. It was completely cleared. It's all south-facing. It's 500 feet down to about 480, so very gently sloped. I mean, it's ideal pretty much in every way.
Right.
There was a small ranch house there, so I drove up and knocked on the door, and the owner was home, and he ended up selling it to me on the spot.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, you had a conversation with your wife saying, I'm only going to go look,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to buy,
Yeah,
but you ended up buying.
right.
What was that conversation like when you got home?
Well, that was interesting. First of all, I think most people that do something like that, where you're going to pretty much uproot your whole family, the life they've known their entire lives, take them away from their schools and their friends, and your wife and her friends and all of that to pursue your dream,
Right.
right? Would probably say the same thing, as what happened to me, which was nobody really thought it was a good idea. Okay, in my family, they were like, "You did what? You do what?" And I said, "Well, don't worry, it's just bare land right now, and
Right.
it's going to take years to develop it. But eventually, I want you to understand that I'm going to want to move there, and we're
Right.
going to, and that's what is going to become my full-time career, and you guys are going to love it. Trust me,
Right.
And it was 7 years before we finished building our new home here."
Right.
And moving here, and it still wasn't enough time for them to get adjusted.
Well, yeah, no, and I was going to iterate that it wasn't an immediate thing because
No.
you bought it, and then like 2 years later you planted vines, and
Right.
then a couple years after that was your first harvest,
Yeah.
and then
3
you like,
years to be precise.
yeah,
But yeah.
and then you finally made the trek up here. So it was
Right. The year that, and I was still working my day job in tech all that time while I was developing this, and I still had my import-export business in Napa. So I kept all of that until 2005.
right,
And then did my second planting here in 2005, and then did my final planting in the spring of 10, that meant that in the fall of 2012, all of the vines were planted for this site, and they were all producing. In that September, I left my day job and started becoming a full-time winemaker at that time.
wow. And I was going to ask, like, what were those transition years like? I'm sure that you're working your tech job, during the day, and then like probably getting on a plane Friday afternoon to come up here on the weekends. Is that how it was?
I
or?
was actually driving up here
Holy.
every other week. I'd come every other week, and
Right.
I'd drive, Friday, get here late Friday night, work Saturday and most of the day Sunday, and then drive back Sunday night. And I do that every other week. I did that for like 5 years.
Congratulations. I mean, that's a dedication all within itself right there.
Well, if
I mean,
you want to, do something, you got to work for it.
Right.
Unless, like I said, unless you're born wealthy or something, for me, it was, it's a big sacrifice. It's a lot of work, and
Right.
you question yourself what you're doing, and why. But I always believed in it, and I always believed that I could do it, and wanted to do it, and was passionate about it, and that's what kept me going. I had a vision.
right. No, you would definitely have to have something to keep you going. Otherwise, you're just going to fall asleep at the wheel during your drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, congratulations.
Thanks.
Yes. Oh, the Ribbon Ridge Wine Growers Association. So you're the president. Are you still the president?
I am.
And I know that you were talking about being herbicide free and trying to move everybody toward
Yeah.
biodynamic farming.
Mm-hmm.
How is that going?
So just a little point of clarification, not totally herbicide free, but chemical herbicide free.
Okay. Sorry.
And so organic or biodynamic
Okay.
are the terms, right? So
Right.
it's probably half the vineyards in Oregon, I'm just guessing now, are still farmed conventionally, right?
Right.
So they're using glyphosates and they're using systemic, chemicals. And there's good reason for that. You get higher yields and you have less labor costs and all those things. Some people think farming organic is less expensive, but really it's more expensive if you're a small vineyard because you're doing a lot more stuff by hand. And you're also, so you're paying the labor costs, which have continued to rise every year. You have to deal with that. And then the products aren't as long lasting. Organic products are not as long lasting in the vineyard as the synthetic products.
Right.
And so you have to do things more often. And they're expensive. So in the long run, it's more costly to do it that way, but it absolutely makes a better product. We don't do much intervention in the winery. I mean, we're literally none most of the time,
Right.
Other than adding small amounts of sulfites to keep the wine, bacteria free. But other than that, we're just using the grapes. And so, farming to perfection by hand is what we do every year in order to get the best fruit that has, the right characteristics in terms of its, makeup, so that we can make good wine without a lot of intervention. And that's why estate wines are almost always the most valuable.
Of course. So are you giving any thought of trying to convert to biodynamic here on the estate?
I think about stuff like that all the time.
Right.
They're very similar in a lot of respects, organic to biodynamic. Biodynamic is an ancient method of farming that goes by the phases of the moon.
Right.
And it has, some weird incantations that you do in the vineyard, and it uses, cow shit or sheep.
Right.
manure
There's
or whatever.
there's a bunch of recipes that you
You're
can.
gonna stuff your cow horns and bury them in the spring. So we don't do that. So I probably won't do that. But
Okay.
but we do if there's any. We test our plant tissues every year, and we test our soils every third year at a minimum.
Right.
And so if we see any nutrient deficiency or anything like that, I can go to Recology locally in McMinnville, and I can buy, composted, for, organic compost
Right.
for spreading in the vineyard or whatever. We really manage it pretty well with our cover crop. That's really pretty much all we need. And occasionally, every few years we lime the soil, to keep the pH where it should be, which helps the vine uptake the nutrients better. And if we see any like potassium is in nitrogen are the big ones, and if there's any deficiency in either of those, then we can make an application of that. I really don't need to do it very often.
That's great.
If at all.
Well, I mean, you've been farming, here for like 20 years now.
20
So, I
years,
mean,
yeah.
that's,
Exactly 20 years this year.
when you think about it, 20 years, it's like,
Yeah.
where did that time go?
It's a couple decades, man.
I know. It's just, it's hard to, even for me, I've been here in Oregon for the last, now going on 21 years. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a labor of love for sure. Every year, I mean, we get to January 1st and we're starting all over, and you have just a little bit of downtime, and then before we know it, it's going to be bud break again. We've been pruning since, I started on January 4th, and we just finished last week with everything.
Right.
So, it's not like we're not busy during the winter months either. We're doing all that. Plus I've got 140 barrels right now in the winery that I'm taking care of,
They're your little babies. You got to, tend to them and make sure they're all good.
And I'm bottling 3 wines next month. So I've got my spring bottling coming up, and those wines have to get finished off and,
Fun.
Get all their final adjustments and get them filtered and get them into the bottle.
That's
always an exciting time.
It is.
But it's nerve-wracking for the winemaker.
Well, and on top of it, right? I mean, you have spring, and then you're gonna have summer coming up, and then like your
Farming's
property,
gonna take off.
that's gonna take off. But like your property up here is just, it's gorgeous up here for a tasting.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, we really want people to just come and have a relaxed, comfortable atmosphere, and they can be interested in wine, or they can just relax or whatever. But, I'm usually here, especially on the weekends, to talk to the people if they want to learn about viticultural or winemaking. Or, I give private tours, and we do private tastings. And otherwise, you can just come and hang out on the patio or the deck or the picnic area, and, have a glass or a bottle, enjoy a picnic, and play some bocce ball or some cornhole, and
Exactly.
and just hang out. It just is. It's really just to make it comfortable and relaxed, for people,
And
where
hope
they feel safe.
right. And hopefully this year, I know in years past that you've had like OMSI out here to do like a. Are you going to be able to do that again this year?
Yeah, we were even able to do it during 2020.
Nice.
When we had all the shutdowns and stuff, we just modified the approach. But yeah, it's going to be actually July 30th. We've already got the date set, weather permitting.
Right.
And then Portland Opera will be here on August 27th again. And we did a Shakespeare play in the vineyard last year. I would like to do that again. Unfortunately, with COVID, some of the companies have not been able to hold together with all the challenges. But hopefully, if we start to come out of things this year, which we all hope we are. I just heard this morning that Oregon is lifting its indoor mask mandate on March 19th.
Oh, nice.
So that, hopefully that holds up. Hopefully some new variant doesn't come along and, mess us up again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, we have the tools, we're better managing it. They're learning more about the virus all the time. So
Yeah.
I think we're hopefully get back to some sense of normalcy this year. I'm really looking forward to having a more normal summer and really just, getting back to life and in the vineyard and everything without all the down, all the negative news and everything.
Yeah. No, I think you're not alone.
Right.
Right. I mean, everybody kind of wants that.
Yeah. I mean, when the vaccines came out in 21 and everyone started getting vaccinated, all the adults at least, we really saw a surge in the tasting room visits.
I can imagine.
People really were coming up, and everyone had that same sense of kind of, oh, thank God, we're able to travel and we're able to go out and experience life again. So you really can sense that that's happening again right now.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Speaking of kind of negative news, the 2020 wildfires.
Yeah.
When we talked last, it sounded like you'd done a bunch of research and that you had found, a method and a protocol that was appropriate to, look at smoke taint, and everything was looking really, really good when we talked last time.
Yeah. So for my fruit here, AJ, we didn't have any ill effects from the smoke, and that was primarily because we didn't get any young smoke near the vineyard. The only thing we had was the haze that drifted in 7 to 10 days later after the fires that were more south and east of here.
Right.
And I mean, that led to poor air quality and everything, but it really didn't affect the vines. There was no ash associated with that.
Right.
And so I did have a client who was out near the Santiam fire, which was a big one, and his fruit was damaged, and it was rejected by a larger winery that we had it sold to for smoke taint specifically. And I had it brought up to my winery, and I made it was Pinot Gris, so it's a white wine. And with white wines, you don't ferment them on the skins, and that's where the volatile compounds are going to be in the skins mainly. And so if you're not fermenting on the skins, and if you don't press real hard, you shouldn't get too much of that, right? These were really covered in ash, and there's a thing called a bucket test. So when the fruit came in, I just took some of the clusters and threw them in a bucket of water, and the water immediately turned ashen gray. So you could just see it. So we decided to put it through the line and rinse it all off and resort it into slotted bins, and then I rented some big fans, and we put them in the coolest spot in the winery, and we dried them off for 36 hours, and then we very gently pressed it, and then I treated the must with what's called the Lafort protocol. Lafort is a French company and laboratory that has developed protocols for handling smoke taint. There's a bunch of them, and they have a USA division. And there are a bunch of different labs that have been dealing with that for the Californians and the Australians and stuff since about 2006. So, there was quite a bit of research and work that's been done on it. And since I'm a winemaker, I wanted to treat the must because that's when we make adjustments prior to fermentation, if at all possible, as opposed to trying to filter it later, which, based on what I had read, at least up to that point, had, mixed results to where maybe some of those compounds could reappear in the wines later. So I was more of a fan of trying to develop a protocol for treating the must, and so that's what I did. I borrowed from several different protocols and then added a step in the beginning and a step at the end of my own to try and really, cinch it for me. And we did that, and the wine seems to be fine.
That's
it's a
great.
nice little Pinot Gris, and I learned something along the way, and now I've got a protocol for dealing with smoke taint. And then there's new products and new research every year, so it's not like you ever have it all figured out, especially with the little teeny tiny bit of experience that any of us have with smoke taint right now. We still have a lot to learn and stuff, but I'm glad I had that experience, and I'm glad I got to practice on somebody else's fruit. So it was a good experience. It was a lot of work. I wouldn't want to do it, believe me, because it was a lot of labor to do it. It took a lot of effort, and I'm thankful that we could do it and we got the results. But I definitely wouldn't want to have to do it again.
Well, hopefully we don't have to.
I have a feeling it's probably not the last time, but hopefully, according to our climatologist from Linfield, formerly from Linfield, Greg Jones, that was a 1,000-year, set of circumstances that caused a lot of that,
interesting
smoke and everything to arrive here because of the way the winds were and stuff. Yeah.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure when 2021 came around, there was no fires, and you were able to bring in all this fruit. That had to be like thank you.
Well, with the drought and everything, we were on pins and needles. We were just waiting for the smoke to show up. And fortunately, it did not.
Right.
And even though we had some rain in the middle of flowering, we still got a pretty good fruit set. And we got a decent crop, especially with our Pinot clones. And Chardonnay was still low, but we brought in, I was happier than I expected to be with the yield. So that was a really, really nice bounce back from 2020 where the yields were way down, and then we had to deal with COVID and the fires and everything else. It was like the four horsemen were bringing up the apocalypse.
Right. No, it's nice to have a nice little shiny rainbow at the end of the tunnel. It's like, finally.
Yeah. So we're always cautiously optimistic when we're going into a growing season. And,
of course.
Really critical times are going to be during flowering, in the second half of June, and then into early July, depending on the weather, and then in the fall, seeing when the rains come or don't come, and if we have enough moisture, to keep the vines going and get some additional hang time.
Right.
Those are the things that are really critical. You can go all year and everything can be fine. The last 2 weeks, Mother Nature can mess you up, but
Right, like 2013 with the torrential downpours, right?
Yeah, but we accept that.
Yeah, but still, it's you're at the mercy.
Yeah, I shouldn't say it that way. I mean, I like the challenge of the more difficult years, and I think it focuses me more, and I end up making some of my best wines
Right.
in those years that are really standouts, in those difficult vintages. But yeah, I guess if I had my wish come true, I'd wish for an ideal growing season every year.
Of course, but that may not be as much fun then.
Yeah, it would be
Right.
less interesting for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I remember talking to a winemaker that used to be in California, and he's like, "Yeah, we know what the weather's going to do. It's just kind of boring." And I'm like, he's like, "That's why I like Oregon. It's never boring."
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, you get knocked out of the box pretty easy here,
yeah,
with our cooler climate and if you get early rains, or whatever, you can, or a late frost or whatever, which doesn't really happen too much in the Willamette Valley. I don't think it's ever happened, especially at 500 feet above elevation. We're a little bit insulated from that, but you never know because of the global weirding as far as the weather that's going on. We're getting some really weird
right,
stuff. We had 60s in February, which, you
right.
definitely don't expect to see that.
No.
And now we're down in the 20s for the lows, low 20s, even the teens.
Right. No, it was.
This week.
Yeah. No, it's been an interesting month.
Yeah, so that's a pretty wild ride.
It is.
Yeah.
You kind of touched on the winery and whatnot. So that's like a new addition within the last couple years, and you have some more acreage. And what are your plans there?
Yeah, so it's really exciting. So we have another property that's up on Ribbon Ridge, but on the other side of the road from our current site, and it was forest. It was agricultural forest land. And in 2019, I cleared 15 acres, and we've been prepping the ground and getting it all ready for planting. And we're going to plant this fall. I've already selected the clones and the rootstock, and we've already got the contract in place, and so we know we're going to get those
Nice.
vines in the fall. And so it's pretty exciting. I'm going to do more Pinot and Chardonnay and some Gamay Noir up there, and I've got 2 Champagne clones, a Chardonnay and a Pinot Noir clone as well, for a future sparkling project that I want to do. I'm excited about that.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it'd be really fun. And so we're expanding. We're going to almost double our vineyard capacity, and we'll be 25 plus acres of planted vines, close to maybe 32 acres or something like that when it's all in.
Right.
Which is, one of the bigger vineyards on Ribbon Ridge now.
I know.
Once it starts producing. So we expect to get our first fruit from that site in the fall of 2025. And, the winery is already up and it's been running. I've been making wine there since the fall of 2019. And so it's just awesome. It's really, it's so nice to have your own space. And,
Right.
I've got a couple of small wineries that are making their wine there. And then I've got a couple custom crush clients that I'm making the wines for in addition to my stuff. So, plenty to do. And, I'm sure we're going to expand beyond that in
Right.
the future, and eventually, in the 3 to 5 year plan, build a new tasting room up there so we can get everything in one spot up there, and then make this kind of the vineyard and get the tasting room out of my backyard. And,
Have some privacy.
yeah, have a little more privacy and be able to still, use the property for weddings or, special events or club events or whatever we may want to do,
Right.
but have the main focus for the public up there.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
I have to dive a little bit into the sparkling because I'm just a big sparkling guy.
Yeah.
Are you going to go method
Yeah,
traditional?
we're going to go full bore if we're going to do it. We're going to do it right.
Okay, so like a Blanc de Blanc and maybe like a Blanc de Noir, or are you going to do a blend? Or
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? Okay.
The fruit and the growing seasons will dictate a little bit of what we do, especially in the beginning. But yeah, definitely Blanc de Blanc and Blanc de Noir. That's definitely on the drawing board.
Oh, that's so much fun.
Really excited about it.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to see all the sparkling programs just popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's I wasn't a judge for this year's Mac wine competition, but I was a volunteer and I got to like listen in and so the final two wines, it was a Pinot Gris and a sparkling, right? And I'm not a judge, so I can't like say anything.
Right.
But it was asked, there was asked like, well, what do y'all think? And the room was silent, and I'm like, the sparkling's got to win. Come on. Oh, then I got hushed. I'm like, fine. But the Pinot Gris ended up winning out. But it's so fun and fascinating.
Yeah.
Is it so you're sparkling? Are you kind of thinking like a members only kind of offering, or are you kind of like going to expand it out more for it to be a little bit bigger?
I mean, we pretty much sell to our members anyway, so
Right.
there'll be enough eventually to put it on the website and stuff, so other people have access to it.
Right.
In the beginning, when it's really small, I'm sure that it's gonna, it's one of those things where it's just gonna be really popular right off the bat.
Of course.
And it will go. It be pretty much allocated, in the beginning.
Right.
But eventually, yeah, we'll do more, and I can always, if it gets really popular, I can buy fruit from other growers and make more of it. But we're pretty much an estate winery, and I'm not trying to get big. You know what I mean?
Right.
I just
right.
want to stay small and keep the the whole ambiance of what we have, and the mystique of just a small. I consider myself a vigneron. I'm someone who makes wine from grapes that I grow myself. And so that's always been my passion. It's always been my vision for Utopia. That is my Utopia.
Right.
And so I don't really see it changing that much, when we go from 3,000 to, say, 5,000 cases a year. We still manage that well, with our small staff and crew, our family, basically, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think we'll continue to keep our same model as we go forward.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't imagine you changing a whole bunch. I mean, it's there's something. The word boutique comes to mind, right? But it's much more personable here, right? And it's really nice.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier. We don't sell wine as a beverage. We sell it as an experience.
Exactly.
And people want to come to wine country. They want a wine country experience. I mean, that's what I want when I go to wine country.
Of course.
That's what we all want. And so that's what we strive to give people. Come and see the vines, where the grapes are grown for the wines that you're going to taste. Meet the winemaker and the vineyard manager. And,
Right.
If you want, you can go as deep as you want, or you can just, enjoy yourself, or relax, play some bocce ball and cornhole, or have a night, bring a picnic along, and just have a great day out in the vineyards.
Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be.
To me, that's really, the most I can offer people.
Right. So I'm going to say the word legacy.
Mm-hmm.
When you started this venture, and when you're planting your vines in 2002, what is your take on legacy then, and then your take on legacy now?
I mean, my take then was that I wanted to have my children carry on. I mean, all parents, I think, want their children, especially something like a vineyard and a winery. We want to continue and make that into a family tradition, right? Over time, reality comes in, and I have my oldest daughter who works for me full time, and is certainly capable, and I have one of my 3 son-in-laws who works for me full time. My wife is the office manager. I'm the vineyard manager and winemaker. So,
Right.
It's a family operation today, and we're going to see how it goes over the next several years, and see if somebody really steps up and takes over the helm.
Right.
I'm fairly optimistic that between my full-time family employees that they will.
Right.
But only time will tell. I don't, I'm the one that's the most passionate about it today, but they have gained passion over the years and they understand it, what it takes now. So that's the only hesitation, is seeing how much work it is and what it really takes, to pull it off if you really want to keep that model. So I'm still, like I said, optimistic that we will pass it on. That's certainly still my goal.
That's awesome. It's
Yeah.
to be able to have that, to pass it along for generations. I mean, that's just, it comes from a special place in your heart, and it just means so much more.
It's irreplaceable.
It is.
Yeah.
It very much is.
Yeah.
The Oregon wine community.
Mm-hmm.
I always try to bring out a story or two, of something that stood out to you that somebody else in the wine community kind of like did for you, or that you've done for them. Do you have any stories just off the top of your head?
Well, I mean, the Oregon wine community is pretty tight knit. I mean, it's like family, I mean, it's as close to family without being family, I think, for an industry that you're going to find. And we all, I mean, obviously it's grown a lot, but 20 years ago, we pretty much knew everyone. And today we still know most everyone. And we still, at least pre-COVID and now post-COVID, we still get together on a fairly regular basis, and hopefully that's going to come back the way that it was in the past now that we're getting over the virus. So there are, many, many examples. I mean, part of what we do as a community is we give back to our community. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's just so many examples of that, to the laborers, to the farm workers, with Ahi Avoy and, the different programs that have been going on forever, where we're providing healthcare and housing, which is a benefit to us too, to take care of the workers, obviously, but it's also a benefit to them. And then, sponsoring OMSI and Portland Opera and Oregon Ballet, and the cultural aspects to me is, a way, it's one of my buttons that, I like to push, and it's a way to really give back to the community as a whole. But then all the little things, all the school wine auctions and community centers, and I mean, it literally goes on year round, where we're constantly giving back to each other. And then as far as each other, I mean, on Ribbon Ridge, we're all neighbors. We all pull together, and we would give each other the shirt off our back during the growing season. And I've had times when my sprayer has broke down and it's going to rain the following day, and I'm only halfway done with my spray, and I really have to finish it that day. And I've called my neighbor, and no matter what he's doing, he drops everything. He brings his sprayer over, and I get to finish my job. Or at harvest, someone calls me and they need some more picking bins, or they need a tank, because that's always an issue, is capacity in a winery, Right. And that always is. It's like, yeah, I'll be there, in 30 minutes or whatever. It's always an instant yes. And that is really special. And then once the wine gets bottled, it's every man for himself. But up to that point,
right.
We have each other's back, and we get a good intrinsic, benefit from helping our neighbors. It feels good to reach out to the community and to help people. I mean, it's one of the best feelings that you can get in life, I think.
It is.
So we all benefit from it. We all realize that.
Yeah, and maybe it's part of maybe this kind of the spirit of Oregon as well. I remember you telling me a story. I think it was Harvest 2020, mm-hmm. and like your axle went out on your truck or something, right? And then a stranger was driving up Ribbon Ridge, had a big old flatbed. Yeah. And he was like, "Hey, and he just helped you out, and you put on,
Yeah. It literally was one of my neighbors that I had not met. Well, it was an employee of one of my neighbors, right. Who I'd met the neighbor, but I had not met the employee. And my truck, my 1993 Dodge Farm pickup truck that I used to haul my grapes with my little trailer, the mile and a half up the road to get to the winery from the vineyard, had a leak, and that leak caused it was transmission fluid, and it all leaked out as I was pulling out with a full load, and I still had several loads that I needed to come back and run up, and it just died. So I jumped in my other vehicle and drove up to the winery and let everyone know, hey, I got to find a trailer, so everybody take a break. I'll be back in a little while. And as I came out of the winery, I noticed this Ford 350 hauling this giant trailer, and it was empty.
Right.
And it looked like they had just unloaded it.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was right there, and I drove up, I introduced myself to the guy, and I said, hey, I'm really in a bind. Is there any way I could get you to help me? Because I really didn't know what I was going to do. And so he immediately said, well, let me call my employer, make sure it's okay. He did. And she knew me, and I knew that she would say it's fine. She said, yes, right, absolutely, go ahead. I said, just send me the bill at the end, And so we were able to get everything in one load, because this was a massive trailer, instead of me going back in 3 loads. So we actually ended up getting the fruit to the winery quicker than I would have been able to do had my truck not died. And she never sent me a bill.
Right, and I believe you gave the employee like a big old bottle, like a Magnum.
Yeah, gave him a Magnum to enjoy, that evening, and told him come out anytime. And but it was, it's just one of those many stories that, when things happen, somebody has your back.
Yeah, and it's amazing.
It really is.
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't just talk the talk,
No.
We walk the walk. And I mean, think about it. They were in the middle of their own harvest. Right. You can't get a more stressful time,
no,
for a winemaker than harvest.
No,
or a busier time.
Right.
And they, and they had I'm sure, a very long day, because this was at the end of the day. It was twilight.
Right.
And he came down, and I loaded it up, and he waited over all the time to load everything up and to haul it up and to unload it.
Right.
So it was a couple hours at least.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would you consider wine art?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the winemaker, is going to have an immense effect on the finished product. The idea is to start with good fruit. If you like the fruit, then you're going to like the wine.
Right.
But I mean, there are so many decisions that you have to make along the way that are going to impact. I mean, right from the beginning of farming that growing season to when you actually pick the fruit, because that's going to fix the fruit, so that's part of the winemaking, is those decisions, and then getting in the winery and everything that you need to do in order to see that wine all the way through the process, and bad things can happen anywhere along the way. So, right, you really have to have, you have to have the basics, but you have to have the experience and the know-how to be able to react instantly, whenever anything comes up, and know in, varying circumstances what is the right decision that you're not going to see the effect of for maybe 2 years. That's hard. Yeah. Yeah. It's so hard. Right. Yeah. I have some rapid fire questions for you. All right. Who is your favorite artist to listen to during harvest? Well, I was born in 1955. I grew up in the 60s and learned about music from my older siblings, and that was right when the Beatles and the whole British pop invasion, came. Right. And so, we were listening to Chubby Checkers and Fats Domino and everything, and then the Beatles, Chuck Berry, right, Little Richard, right, and a lot of the Motown stuff, in the early years, and then the Beatles came and kind of changed everything. And so I'm a big fan of the Beatles, but also, soft rock from that 60s, 70s era. That's what I really like. I like almost any music, Right. I like classic country. I like jazz a lot, right, classic jazz, modern jazz, you name it. I really dig music, Right. But yeah, my favorite is definitely soft rock from the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, no, it's that era of time in music is just,
It's phenomenal.
it really is.
Yeah.
What is your favorite indulgent food?
Red meat.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, for indulging, I mean,
Right.
I'm not a huge dessert person. I like ice cream. That's my one failing. And I love, we're very blessed to have the small farms out here and be able to get fresh meat and produce and things like that. Right. So just basic, really good ingredients to make a really good meal. But we get carried away. We'll get some live Maine lobster and some steaks from the local farms and do our own version of surf and turf out here. We also get a lot of, salmon from our friends that fish and stuff. And so we eat a lot of the Northwest salmon and drink a lot of Oregon Pinot with it.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, it is.
If you could choose a superpower, what would it be?
Wow. I guess maybe being able to see into the future.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Your harvest notes, are they digital or handwritten?
They're handwritten.
Okay. Favorite superhero?
Superman.
Okay. And what's the last book that you read?
The last book I read was, that's a good question. It's not the last book I read, but it's the one that comes to mind right now, which was the trilogy around Catching Fire, because my daughter and I trade books.
Oh,
and
nice.
It was one she picked.
Okay.
So I read that, but I mostly read research.
Understandably.
That's where I spend a lot of my time.
All right. Well, should I reveal the wine?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Let me,
So you said earlier that it was a little bit of an older wine. You said about
5 or 6 years maybe on the bottle.
Yeah. So it's a 2016 Nicholas J.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It was that part was pretty evident.
Yeah.
It's got a little bit of Brett, which was throwing me off because it masks a lot of the fruit characteristics. You get that spicy characteristic, or
Right.
some people think it's earthy.
Right.
But it masks a lot of the variety characteristics because you're getting all that spice on the palate. And so I was having a hard time. I mean, I know there's some cherry there underneath that, but I was having a hard time really getting underneath that to get to the actual fruit. And it was making me wonder, wow, this could even maybe be a Grenache, but I was pretty sure it was a Pinot. But I was also thinking in my mind, if it's anything else, it's a Grenache.
Interesting. Yeah. No, it was an interesting bottle, and it's nice to open up a little bit of an older Pinot every now and then.
Are you pretty familiar with Brett?
Ish.
Brettanomyces cinerea, right, is the scientific name, and Brett for short. And it is a non-Saccharomyces yeast strain that acts as a wine spoilage mechanism. However, so UC Davis produces, the aroma wheel. Maybe you've seen that.
Right.
Well, they produce one for Brett.
Okay.
They have a Brett wheel.
Oh, okay.
And that's relatively new, maybe in the last 5 or 10 years. And there are 2 types of Brett. There's type 3, which is more of a medicinal kind of sourish. They say horsehair, or chicken shit, or not pleasant things, right? But cat piss, stuff like that, right?
Right.
It's like, well, I don't know how that tastes, but whatever.
Yeah, no, thank you.
But then there's Brett 4, which is supposedly, quote unquote, the good kind of Brett. That is more the spicy, earthy characteristics that we're seeing with this wine.
Okay.
But yeah, if you ever want to learn about Brett, UC Davis website, they have that.
I will have to take a look.
It's interesting, but you find it a lot in Rhone varieties, the French Rhone varieties. Mm-hmm. It's almost always there, especially if it's a 5 or 6 year old bottle like this.
Right.
You're almost always going to get Brett, and so I always try to drink those wines younger to avoid the Brett, because to me as a winemaker, Brett is a fault. Even though I could easily drink this wine and enjoy it with the right piece of meat or something, that's fine. But it's always going to be in the back of my mind. It's going to have that fault.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's all the questions that I have. I really appreciate your time.